Inside they go, the dive by Powell.
How about the pass, though, by Luka?
Down low, Doncic with the bump and the spin. Another two, and he's got 12. Into Ayton. The bump and the fadeaway. Textbook. Big smile, 19 points.
He's going to be the primary ball handler with Luka on the floor as well. This gives him a chance to rest.
On the move, Dinwiddie. A shot right there, close range over Ayton.
Thing about his game that gives him comfort.
Doncic, what a hard shot. Under a minute to go here in the first half. Stunning. 27-point lead. Down goes Johnson. 3. Luka.
Oh, no.
They're shredding him.
It was possibly the biggest embarrassment of a performance in playoff history, the team with the best record in the regular season and defending Western Conference champions getting absolutely obliterated on their home court in a Game 7 elimination game. Everyone knew the game was already over by halftime, and the hometown fans booed their team as they headed for the exits by the third quarter. Was it just a bad game from one of the best teams in the league and a very untimely bad game in the playoffs, or was it something more indicative of deeper issues that resided with this team that were going to carry into next season? And while it initially looked like the roster was going to quickly pick up where it left off, starting off exceedingly well in the regular season, had quickly turned into a team that is now spiraling out of control, fighting to even make the playoffs in the Western Conference. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy the content, then consider subscribing, as this is a new channel, and in return I'll be providing more NBA content like this all season long. Now, for the longest time, over the past decade or so, the Phoenix Suns were year after year sitting towards the bottom half of the Western Conference. Bad season after bad season resulted in multiple lottery picks and then very poor selection of said lottery picks with guys like Kendall Marshall, Alex Len, who was selected 5th overall, TJ Warren, Dragon Bender, who they took 4th, Josh Jackson, also 4th overall, Jalen Smith, who they took 10th, but they did hit on one phenomenal player and a late lottery pick in Devin Booker, who has really turned into a superstar player in the NBA, arguably a top 10 player in the league, without question at least a top 15 player in the league. And then of course they selected DeAndre Ayton 1st overall in 2018, who has also been a great piece for them in building that young core, even though they selected Ayton ahead of Luka Doncic. And when the Phoenix Suns got invited into the bubble as really one of the last teams that just made the cut, they took full advantage of that and went undefeated in the bubble despite still narrowly missing the playoffs. And then, after they made the trade for Chris Paul going into the 2021 season, which was met with some skepticism on why they would move younger assets to get an aging Chris Paul, who was 35 years old at the time and on an expiring contract, it ended up becoming one of the best decisions the franchise had made in years. And Chris Paul, along with the breakout of Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton continuing to get better, Cam Johnson becoming a valuable piece, and then Mikal Bridges being one of the most underrated players in the league, which they traded for on draft night as a number 10 selection. All of this really propelled the Phoenix Suns going from this perpetual lottery team to title contender in a matter of one season, making it all the way to the NBA Finals the year prior, where they had just missed the playoffs, winning the first 2 games in the finals as well, to where you thought this was going to be a lottery team to NBA champions within one season. But then the Milwaukee Bucks went on a tear and won the next 4 games, securing their title. But despite that crushing loss in the finals, the belief around the league at the time was this team will be back. They have a young core that fits incredibly well together, a veteran savvy point guard who is an all-time great, a great coach. Everyone thought this team would be back, and right away the following season they did come roaring back, punishing every team in the league on a nightly basis, finishing with the best record in the league, 64 wins in the regular season, 1st in the league in net rating, one of the best offensive teams in the NBA. This team was next level, and they were poised to win their first title in franchise history, until they met the Dallas Mavericks in the playoff series and got dismantled on their own home court in Game 7. And while the Suns started off the season well, like I mentioned, something has fundamentally changed about this team that has caused them to collapse and scratching to even string together multiple wins. And while yes, obviously Devin Booker being out of the lineup due to injury for nearly a month now doesn't help their cause, and you would expect them to take a dip in the standings due to his absence, falling in the manner that they have is not something you would have expected from this team, who was viewed as one of the title favorites to start the season. Dropping below 500 11th in the Western Conference, and having lost 12 of their last 14 games. They went from a 16-7 record just last month to now 21-24. Now, as I mentioned, Booker being out is a huge reason why this team has been struggling, but this team started playing poorly even before Booker went down. Booker hasn't played since the Christmas Day game, which he only played a little bit before sitting out the rest of the game due to the injury. He was in and out of the lineup for a couple of weeks prior to that, but up until December 9th, he had been playing in every game for the Suns. And even when Booker was in, the team was losing, and losing badly. They lost to one of the worst teams in the league in the Houston Rockets. They were getting blown out by teams like the Mavs, the Celtics, the Grizzlies, the Wizards, the Knicks, losing to good and bad teams. Booker goes down, Chris Paul is in and out of the lineup, which you kind of should have expected given he's 37. Like, I understand why you gave CP3 that contract extension after taking the team to the finals, but you had to know that level of play wasn't going to last forever at his age. DeAndre Ayton has missed games, although he's only missed a few here and there. Same with Cam Johnson and Cameron Payne. But injuries aside, something has changed with this team that has led to their downfall, and it starts with the team that they lost to that embarrassed them in the playoffs the season prior when they lost to the Dallas Mavericks this year, getting blown out 130-111 on December 5th. Prior to that loss, they were 16-7, and since then, 5-17. Now, if you remember, DeAndre Ayton and Coach Monty Williams got into that altercation in that Game 7 loss against the Mavs around halftime, which caused Williams to bench Ayton the whole second half, which didn't really matter because by that point the game was over. And it was because DeAndre Ayton simply didn't want to play. He was pouting that his team was losing so badly, and Williams asked him, "Are you going to play or not?" And Ayton took the high road and sat. That moment changed the relationship between Williams and DeAndre Ayton, so much so that it carried into the offseason, that even after the Suns matched the restricted free agency offer sheet from the Indiana Pacers for a max deal, that on media day, when Ayton was asked about his relationship with Monty Williams, he was super vague and mentioned how they haven't really talked all summer. And despite the team's best to work on that relationship and build communication between the team and its players and its coaching staff, it just hasn't worked. You've seen Ayton getting into it with Williams on the sidelines during timeouts this season. There are games where it just looks like he doesn't want to be there, isn't playing with a ton of effort and energy, and as a result, you're kind of seeing this sentiment trickle down to the rest of the team. Like, as much as we like to think, well, one bad apple shouldn't impact the rest of the team and how they feel and perform, but it actually has a huge impact on the roster when you're busting your ass off and you have other guys not meeting the same level of effort or simply not caring on a game-by-game basis. It matters. It matters on and off the court. It affects team chemistry and the overall identity of the organization. And I'm not just going to sit here and blame everything on DeAndre Ayton, because I think there are more deeper-rooted issues with this franchise, from the offseason drama with Robert Sarver to the team being sold and under new ownership now, to the fact that the team clearly still hasn't gotten over that horrific Game 7 loss, and injuries, of course, also playing a factor. But the biggest factor, by far and away, has been the fractured relationship between DeAndre Ayton and Coach Monty Williams, and more importantly, it's becoming clear that Monty Williams has lost hold of the locker room. They're not responding to him like they used to. They're not respecting him like they used to. And the mounting frustration and tension is becoming palpable to the point where you have to ask yourself, has this team, as is currently constructed, run its course? They had a nice run over the last couple of seasons, but is that it? Is it time to start making changes? Or can they recover? Now, I don't doubt that once Booker comes back, which he should be soon, they'll be starting to make their way back up into the standings. Like, even despite the fact that they're currently 11th in the West, only 1.5 games separate them from where they are right now and the 6th seed. But I can't see them making the kind of headway to get them all the way into the top 4, not with how competitive and stacked the top of the West is. But even despite their ability to recover somewhat in the standings, the answer is unequivocally yes. And it starts with trading DeAndre Ayton, whose trade restriction after re-signing him has now been lifted. You know, I think the intention all along was to match any offer sheet that Ayton received, even if it was for the max, so that you don't lose a young, very skilled and talented big man for nothing. You can't let your number 1 pick and starting center walk away for nothing, even if you know his heart isn't into it. Even if you know he's butting heads with the coaching staff. You let the market dictate his value, mash the offer, and then trade him for pieces later on. The Suns know that, and I think even Ayton knows that, which is why you haven't seen his head into the game all the time this season. It's why you haven't seen a mending of his relationship with the coach. He likely knows he's not sticking with this team long term. So you trade Ayton, while his value is good, and he has good value across so many teams, whether it be a team that is rebuilding because he's young and can fit the mold of a team that is not a title contender but looking to build, and then also He fits the mold for teams that are looking to contend because he's good enough to be a starting center on a contending team, as he's displayed that already on the Suns. And then finally, as much as I don't like it because I actually think he's a great coach, I think you have to make a coaching change, even if you do still trade DeAndre Ayton, simply because even for the great coaches, which I consider Williams to be one of the better coaches in the league, if the team is simply not responding to you, they don't garner the same level of respect for your coach. While yes, some of that blame should be on the players, you can't trade the majority of your roster and blow it up for a team that has been one of the best squads in the league the past 2 seasons. You make a coaching change, see how the group responds under new leadership, and if the problem still persists, then at that time you make swift changes in revamping the roster. Otherwise, if they don't make any changes whatsoever, I have a hard time seeing this team really making any meaningful noise in the playoffs, even with Devin Booker coming back to the lineup shortly. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. What do you think the Suns need to do? Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.